University of Disc Golf. My name is Mike Strout, and I'll be your instructor today for Intro to Putting. During this session, we'll cover the basic components of the putt, discuss and demonstrate the most common putting styles, and finish with an overview of some of the topics we'll be covering in upcoming sessions. We've got a lot to cover, so we better get after it. When people ask me for putting tips, I usually break the putt down into 3 components. It doesn't matter which putting technique you choose to use or are forced to use because of your lie, these steps will apply to all the most common ways to get your disc to the chains. The first and probably most important step is to take some time to visualize the path that the disc needs to take from your hand to the chains, taking into consideration things like distance, elevation, terrain, weather conditions, and obstacles like trees and bushes. After you have that clear mental picture of the flight path, the second step is to get the disc moving cleanly away from your body along that path. This seems obvious, but if it were easy, no one would ever miss their putts. Third, once you get the disc moving along that path, you need to get your hand out of the way. Again, this is really obvious, but it's deceptively difficult. Oftentimes when a player wants to exert more control over their putt, maybe because they're struggling or the pressure is building during a tournament, they have a tendency to hang on to that disc too long. This can dramatically affect the biomechanics of the putt and impact the flight of the disc as a result. If you manage to get all 3 of these steps executed perfectly, there's a good chance you're going to be rewarded. Notice I said chance though, because no matter how much you plan and practice, you can't eliminate the role luck plays in disc golf. Now that you understand a little bit more of the key components of putting, let's see how they're applied to each of the main putting styles used in disc golf today. As you can see from that putting montage, there are a lot of different ways to putt. Some are good, others not so much. So you may ask, which one should I learn? Our response at the UofDG would be nearly all of them, because every putting situation has a technique that'll work best for it. If you can only putt one way, you may end up having to make some harder shots than you otherwise might need to. You have to start somewhere though, and we believe that somewhere is with the backhand putt. I know there are some diehard sidearm putters out there and turbo putters that would challenge us about this. But there are some pretty good reasons why we rarely see pros regularly using one of those 2 putts. We will, however, cover the turbo putt and sidearm putting styles in a few minutes when we talk about specialty putts. First though, let's focus on the various types of backhand putts. Probably the most common putting technique you will see out on the disc golf course is what I call the pull putt. It's very much like the frisbee throw you may have learned on the beach or at the park. With the pull putt, the body is turned about 40 degrees away from the basket. The pull putt begins mid-torso, slightly offset to the non-throwing arm side of the body. The putter is held at about 11 o'clock and is briskly pulled away from the body at the same time that the weight is shifted from the back foot to the front. The biggest advantage of the pull putt is that it provides the most linear path to the chains. This is beneficial when you have a tight path vertically or horizontally to the basket. The downside though of this putt is that the biomechanics are complicated and difficult to keep consistent. The wrist, elbow, shoulders, your free arm, and for that matter, your entire body must move with precise timing in order to ensure success. The second backhand technique, the swing putt, has gained popularity in recent years thanks to some top pros that use it. Rather than pulling the disc away from your body, the swing putt is more like tossing a ball underhand into a bucket. The swing putt usually starts much lower and the arm is swung from the shoulder toward the basket. The upper body is bent forward at the waist some to allow for that swinging motion. There typically isn't as much weight shift with a swing putt compared with a pull putt. The biomechanics are much easier and repeatable for the swing putt, but there are a few downsides. First, some swing putters tend to lob the disc into the basket, which takes up a lot more vertical space, making those putts with limited headroom a little bit more challenging. Second, the swing putt motion isn't as compact as a nice tight pull putt. If you're standing in front of an obstacle, you may need to change your frequently practiced swing to something less familiar or comfortable. Finally, many swing putters release the disc on hyzer. Wind is more likely to have an impact on the flight of the disc. Besides the pull putt and swing putts that we at the University of Disc Golf believe are the most consistent putting techniques, there are a few other styles that probably shouldn't be your primary putt, but are certainly valuable in difficult situations. The frisbee putt is similar to the biomechanics of a pull putt, with the exception that the body is typically rotated more away from the basket and the pull starts away from the center line of the body. The frisbee putt is great for long putts and approach shots where accuracy isn't as important as speed and distance, but it doesn't work as well when you're trying to hit a specific point on the basket. Because the disc starts away from the center line of the body, it's difficult to visualize the correct path to the chains, and even more difficult to get the disc moving consistently along that path. With the push putt, the body is typically squared up more to the basket, and the putt begins offset to the throwing arm side of the body. The disc is typically held at 1 to 3 o'clock and typically doesn't receive much spin during the throw. The push putt is really handy when putting in tight quarters, like from within a bush. We don't recommend you use it as a general purpose putt though, because it's hard to generate much speed when you're just pushing it out. And because the disc lacks spin, it's difficult to get a consistent flight, especially when putting in the wind. The wrist putt sets up about the same as a pull putt, but the throw typically starts mid-chest. With a quick extension of the arm and a flick of the wrist, the disc is on its way towards the basket. Like the push putt, the wrist putt is a good option when you need to get your disc to the basket without much room to move your arm or body. The big problem with this putt though is that it requires you to do something quickly and precisely with a really flexible joint. But put these three things together and the result, from my experience, is almost always inconsistency. We're going to take a quick break now, but when we return, we'll talk about specialty putts. I've been playing disc golf for a long time now, but when I got serious about my game, I realized I needed a widget in my bag. I've tried many, but my search ended when I found the Acme Widget, for a couple of reasons. First, the design is exceptional, doing exactly what it's supposed to. It's lightweight, but solid at the same time, which brings me to my second point. The Acme Widget is incredibly durable, unlike other widgets that might not even make it last a season. Finally, more pros use the Acme Widget than any other widget on the market today. So if you want to play like a pro, put an Acme Widget in your bag. Welcome back to the UofDG Intro to Putting. Better than 90% of the time, you'll probably be putting backhand, but there will always be those situations where your standard backhand putt just won't do. For those times, you better have some specialty putts in your bag. So let's look at a few. The turbo putt is ideal for those situations where you have a large obstacle in front of you, and the best way to get to the basket is by going over the top of it. Usually the thumb is placed in the center of the disc, and the thrower's fingers are at 6 o'clock. At the start of the throw, the arm is moved briskly towards the basket, and the wrist is snapped quickly to rotate the disc and add spin. Because the disc is typically just balancing on the thumb, consistency can be a problem. Also, because the disc starts above your shoulder and is thrown down to the basket, wind is more likely to have an impact on the flight of the disc. There will always be those situations where there's no path to it through an obstacle, under it, or over the top with a turbo putt. And your only option to get the disc to the chains is to step out and try and go around it. In times like this, you better have some sidearm putting skills. The sidearm putt starts significantly away from the center line of the body. The wrist is moved straight along the visualized path, and the wrist is snapped at the last second to add spin. This putt is very difficult to throw slowly because that wrist snap adds additional speed. This putt suffers from the same problem as the frisbee putt. Because the path to the chains is so far away from the core of the body, it's very difficult to visualize it, and even more difficult to get the disc moving precisely along that path. Also, because a sidearm putt is difficult to throw slowly, if you don't hit metal, there's a good chance you're going to have a long comeback putt. The final putt we're going to talk about today is the jump putt. It's used when you're about 40, 50, 60 feet or more away from the basket, and you need more power than your standard backhand can offer to get the disc over that distance. The setup for the jump putt is just like the setup for your primary backhand, whether it be a pull or swing putt. The difference is that the player typically squats down a bit and shifts their weight back further, preloading their legs for the upcoming jump. A lot of practice is required to ensure precise timing of all the movements. The biggest challenge with a jump putt is that it requires you to focus on two things at the same time, your throw and your jump. I commonly see timing issues that cause a player's feet to leave the ground before the disc leaves their hands. This is illegal and oftentimes is going to result in a reputt and a loss of a stroke. Most misses I see, though, are caused by a player focusing too much on their legs and not enough on their throw mechanics. They do a perfect jump, but their throw is much less than perfect. To wrap up this session, here's a list of some of the topics we'll be covering in upcoming videos. We'll take a look at footing, stance, posture, and weight shift, key components of every successful putt. We'll take a detailed look at the biomechanics and aerodynamics of various putting styles to make sure you understand how a disc flies and how to get it where you want it to go. We'll look at the rules of putting to make sure that every putt you make is done so legally, so you don't have to come back, do it again, and lose those strokes. We'll look at the always challenging topics of putting in the wind and putting on hills, and also talk about putting from difficult lies. Finally, we'll suggest some effective practice strategies and give you some tips on improving your mental game. I realize this is a pretty big list just for putting, but at the University of Disc Golf, we firmly believe that the more a player knows about the science behind a game, the more beneficial their practice sessions will be, and the lower their scores will be as a result. Be sure to visit UofDG.com often to see our continually growing list of lessons and also to participate in discussions about them. That's about all the time we have for today. For the University of Disc Golf, I'm Mike Strout, and until next time, may the winds be favorable, the trees friendly, and the chains generous.